Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Pulp Crazy. I'm your host, Jason Aiken. In this week's episode, I'm going to be discussing Pigeons from Hell by Robert E. Howard. It first appeared in the May 1938 issue of Weird Tales, being published after Howard's death in 1936. I read this in The Horror Stories of Robert E. Howard, published by Del Rey. Pigeons from Hell is available online at Project Gutenberg Australia, as it's evidently fallen into public domain in that country. However, like all of the Del Rey Robert E. Howard series, I can't recommend The Horror Stories of Robert E. Howard enough. Howard's widely known for his Conan, Solomon Kane, and Kull stories, but he was one hell of a writer, period. This collection of his horror tales isn't to be missed. Besides the wonderful stories within, there's some great interior artwork by Greg Staples. Pigeons from Hell is a short story, set in the southern United States, and seems to take place around the time it was published, the mid-1930s. The main character's name is Griswold. While traveling, he and his friend, John Branner, spend the night in a deserted southern plantation mansion. The two New Englanders sleep on the living room floor in front of the fireplace. But during the night, Branner unexpectedly awakens and walks up the stairs in a trance-like state. Griswold hears a scream from above, then footsteps coming down the stairs. The footsteps belong to Branner, but something is very wrong with him. His face is described as corpse-like, and he has a large gash in the crown of his head. He's also wielding a bloody hatchet. Griswold can't remember what exactly happens next, but he remembers smashing through something to get out of the house. He runs down the road, but something gives chase behind him. Luckily, he encounters the local sheriff, a man named Buckner, who opens fire on the pursuer, which is presumed to be a timber wolf, thus scaring it off. Griswold relays what happened to Buckner, and surprisingly, Buckner doesn't outright dismiss Griswold's story as fiction. This is due to the events occurring in Blassonville Manor. The sheriff's interest is also piqued when Griswold tells him about the pigeons he and Branner saw on their way into Blassonville Manor. Based on the sheriff's response, the pigeons seem to be a known bad omen in the area. The rest of the story deals with Buckner taking Griswold in his charge, and the two of them attempt to solve the mystery of Blassonville Manor and slay whatever entity haunts it. Now, Pigeons from Hell is one of those stories that I really don't want to say too much about. Having read it recently, I can tell you this is one story that will really keep your interest. Pigeons from Hell is just a great story, and I'd say it's almost impossible to read in multiple sittings. I think this is one story that if you start it, you're going to want to finish it right then and there. It's a fast-paced tale too, but it's full of charm and character that makes Howard one of my favorite writers. Pigeons from Hell is a pretty unique horror story in my opinion. It's not one of Howard's mythos-style tales in the vein of H.P. Lovecraft. This is more rooted in the types of ghost stories he encountered growing up in Texas as a kid. There's also a cool link to the supernatural aspects of West Indies folklore. Pigeons from Hell has proven to be a popular story, and has been adapted into other mediums on 3 occasions. The first was for television, in an episode of Thriller in 1961. It was next adapted into a graphic novel by Scott Hampton for Eclipse Comics. It was most recently adapted into a 4-issue miniseries written by Joe Lansdale and illustrated by Nathan Fox, published by Dark Horse Comics in 2008. Now, the Dark Horse mini written by Lansdale appears to be a sort of sequel to the original Robert E. Howard story, but that's just coming from me flipping through the issues. I haven't actually read them. But just by flipping through, it was apparent the miniseries wasn't a direct adaptation. If the little setup I gave for Pigeons from Hell interests you, definitely track down a copy of the horror stories of Robert E. Howard. Kick back and enjoy. That collection is truly a treasure trove of quality horror tales. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Well, that's it for this week's episode of Pulp Crazy. Pulp Crazy is located at pulpcrazy.com. I'm at Pulp Crazy on Twitter and facebook.com/pulpcrazy. My YouTube channel is located at youtube.com/pulpcrazy. You can also email me at pulpcrazy@gmail.com. I hope everyone has a happy Halloween. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.